I picked Alexander Usyk to beat Derek Chisora on points, but there were a lot of people in the comments of my videos saying that if Usyk doesn't knock Chisora out, then he's obviously not going to do anything at heavyweight, and he clearly can't beat any of the big boys. Needless to say, after the fight, they turned up in the comment section of my Usyk Chisora post-fight video to tell me that this guy is not going to do anything against AJ, Fury, Wilder, etc. And many of them were asking me on several different videos whether I have changed my mind about how Usyk would do against the top guys in the division. And this was my response in this particular video, the post-fight video for Usyk Chisora. I said this: I didn't see anything in this fight which made me want to change my view on how well I think Usyk would do against the big heavyweights. I didn't see anything that remotely would make me change my view. I think that Usyk is going to give most, if not all, of the big heavyweights all types of problems. I'm not saying that he'll necessarily beat them all, but I think he can at least beat one of them, maybe two of them. So that's what I was saying. My position had not changed. Why? Because I expected Usyk to be taking the distance by Chisora. I expected him to have to box on the back foot. And I got exactly what I expected. So why on earth would I suddenly change my view that Usyk is going to not be able to do as well at heavyweight as I thought? Doesn't make any logical sense, does it, if I got what I expected from this bout? But I'm just going to show you some of the comments that I got from the viewers. And I'm doing this to demonstrate the difference between perception and reality. And also the fact that a lot of fans can't see past their own biases as well as the limits of their boxing knowledge and understanding. A lot of fans will project their biases onto you. So because I think that Usyk is going to beat at least one of the top heavyweights, if not two of them, they will say, well, you're clearly biased. You see, because they cannot fathom a scenario where Usyk beats an Anthony Joshua or a Deontay Wilder or a Tyson Fury. So the only way for anyone else to believe that he can is there must be some ulterior motive there. There must be an Usyk fanboy or something, because their boxing understanding is very limited. And so they fall into the default position of thinking like fanboys, which is what most of them are. So this person right here says, I think your bias makes you fail to see what people are saying about Usyk's shortcomings. They aren't dismissive of his skills, but simply saying he hasn't performed enough to safely say he can beat the top guys. And frankly, I think they're right. And this has got 6 thumbs up. Let's look at the next comment. This one says, he looked good, but not ready for the top heavyweights. This guy says, how can he beat Fury? No chance, etc., etc. He also says, he ain't beating Fury or AJ. He can juggle, but he ain't going to be heavyweight champ. End of. That's what this individual says. Next one. Says, Usyk won the fight, but I feel Fury or Joshua will be too big for him. This one says, nah, Hatman, Derek won the fight. He says, AJ mauls this guy in the Lion's Den. AJ defeats this guy in under 6 rounds. This guy says, Usyk was poor. Don't see him doing much, or can't see him doing much in the division. Boring as hell. Chisora was very disappointing, same old. Next one here says, I don't think Usyk will be able to hang with the likes of AJ, Fury, and even Wilder. Usyk's power punches were not even that strong. At the end of the day, he could not knock out Chisora. How do you expect Usyk to deal with the power and movement of AJ and Fury? Let's remember, Chisora is a past-it heavyweight and made Usyk work for 12 rounds. Next one here says, I hate when Hatman gets on his bias, does my head in. So this idiot thinks I'm being biased because what? I picked Usyk to win on points, and that's exactly what happened, and I'm saying that he's still going to beat at least one of the top heavyweights. Somehow that he construes as bias. Okay, well, who's been proven to be right and who's been proven to be wrong so far? Next one. This guy says Usyk has enough power to break any opponent after time, but he doesn't have that one-punch power. I still think Joshua and Fury would destroy Usyk. This guy says any heavyweight with a good jab and conditioning beats Usyk all day long. He is a solid fighter and that's all. This guy says, what are you talking about, Hatman? Even Usyk's team thought it was a draw. You're not giving Chisora his due. something against him maybe. See, again, these people can't understand. First of all, this person doesn't understand how to score a fight. And secondly, they're projecting their own fanboy bias onto me. This person says, no, I didn't expect Usyk to blast Chisora out, but I did not think he would have so much trouble keeping Chisora off him. I feel like he lacks the power to compete with the big guys like AJ, Fury, Wilder. It's not that power is the most important thing, but against much bigger men, you need that explosive punch. Well, evidently you don't need that explosive punch. And if you're a student of heavyweight boxing history, you would know this. You see, when I speak about the likes of Usyk and other small heavyweights believing that they can cause major upsets in the division, I'm not doing it because I'm a fanboy. I'm doing it because I've seen this type of thing in the heavyweight division before. I have a particular affinity with the heavyweight division. I have a special place in my heart for the heavyweight division because I boxed at heavyweight myself. It's always been my favorite division. It's always been the division that I study more closely than any other division. And one of the things about heavyweight boxing is that you tend to get more upsets at the elite level than you do in the lighter weight divisions. And it's not just because of punching power. It's also because of the huge size disparities you get between fighters. And this can often throw up strange scenarios where one guy is ridiculously faster than the other guy to a much greater degree than you would see at, let's say, welterweight with most fighters. One guy can be tremendously more coordinated than the other guy. And you saw an example of that with Usyk when he fought AJ. Okay, these kind of disparities in speed, coordination, mobility, etc., tend to be thrown up at heavyweight more so than at the lower weight divisions. So it's not only about punching power. Of course, there have been fights like Lennox Lewis when he fought Hasim Rahman, or Oliver McCall the first time, where Lewis just gets knocked out against the run of play in the first Rahman fight, but the Oliver McCall fight was very short. And people tend to think of heavyweight upsets being that. A guy gets caught with a big shot, but no. Sometimes heavyweight upsets are like Leon Spinks when he beat Muhammad Ali. It's a points thing. Or Michael Spinks when he beat Larry Holmes, coming up from light heavyweight. You see? So, or indeed Alexander Usyk when he beats Anthony Joshua. So anyway, evidently, you don't need that explosive punch to beat the big guys in the division, which is what I've been saying for the longest time. But some people just don't want to hear it. Let's move on to the next comment. This guy says, Usyk isn't going to beat anyone besides Dubois. Surely they regret saying that now. This next guy simply says, you chat rubbish. Okay, well, if getting it right means I chat rubbish, then I don't know what you're looking for. This guy says, Usyk is not beating Joshua or Fury. And this guy in the comments says, or White or Dubois or any mid-tier lot. Never mind top tier. Chisora ain't the best. For me, he's at the end. He doesn't care about losing. He said, who cares if you lose? Once you've got that mentality, you ain't hungry and you're at the end. This person says, I think Chisora's engine let him down. He was gassed after 3 rounds and just on survival. Chisora did well. At some point, I was worried that Usyk will KO him due to the fact that he was exhausted. Well done, Usyk, but to use this fight to see how Usyk will perform against AJ, Tyson, or Wilder tells me he will get beaten because these guys can also move. In my opinion, they can stick and move with Usyk, but not a lot like him, and then exchange combinations here and there, and they have power to do some serious damage. Again, this guy was wrong. If you try and box with Usyk, you will lose. And that goes for Tyson Fury too. He will lose if he just tries to engage in a pure boxing match with Alexander Usyk. This guy says, you don't know what you're talking about. Evidently, you don't know what you're talking about. This guy says Joshua will sort him out. This guy, Box Minds, I think I know Box Minds. Is that somebody in one of my Discord servers? I'm not sure. But he says, Hatman, I wasn't impressed with Usyk. The fact that Chisora landed multiple jabs and punches to the stomach, given the foot speed of Chisora, you have to think that the likes of Anthony Joshua, Fury, and White won't be too worried. I've taken into account the power which you seem to think why people are not impressed. Well, it's not just the power, it's the style. As I said in my post-fight video, the likes of AJ, Fury, and Deontay Wilder can't fight like Derek Chisora. They're not 6'1" short heavyweights who come in a crouch and are going to bull forward, all guns blazing. They're not like that. They all stand up much taller and they present a much bigger target. They're not going to apply such intense pressure. So it's not just about people getting gassed about heavyweight power. That's the reason I think people are overlooking Usyk, but it's also the style of Chisora. Fury, Joshua, and Wilder don't have that style. In fact, they can't box like that. You can't have a 6'9" guy, 6'8", 6'9" like Fury, getting down as low as Chisora. That's impossible. Okay, so it's not just the power, it's also the style. Chisora's style is such that it gave Usyk problems which Anthony Joshua wasn't able to give him. And there was actually a couple people in the comments. One of them said very specifically that he thought that, or he has been saying for the longest, that Chisora will actually give Alexander Usyk more trouble than Anthony Joshua. Not that Chisora beats Anthony Joshua, but just based on styles, this person believed that Chisora is going to give, Anthony Joshua more trouble. He's going to give Alexander Usyk more trouble than AJ would. And he was right. Let's move on to the next comment here. This guy says, Usyk won clear enough, but he certainly isn't beating AJ, Fury, and Wilder. All have much faster feet than Chisora, whose slow feet was the main reason he lost. All have a much longer reach than Derek. In fact, I think that Wilder would be the most dangerous of all for Usyk, because he has a long reach and closes the gap so quickly. It's not just about having a long reach. It's also about the coordination. When you're on the outside against a guy like Usyk, you're not going to match him for coordination. If you're Deontay Wilder, you're not even going to come close. You saw when Tyson Fury fought Steve Cunningham that he was struggling with coordination on the outside against Cunningham. It's not until Usyk got in the ring with AJ that people saw what I've been talking about for all these years when it comes to small heavyweights. The coordination, the speed that they have, the balance is far superior to these big guys. And so if the big guys try and fight them at their own game, they're going to come off second best. And that's what AJ tried to do in there. And I'm not surprised he tried to do that. Anyway, moving on to the next. I actually said in my post-fight video that AJ and Fury and Wilder are going to try and box Usyk to some degree. They're not just going to come in all guns blazing like Chisora did, but they're actually going to try and box with him. And that's what I said in this video is why, that's the reason I gave in this video for why Usyk is going to find it easier to hit those other guys than he found it to hit Chisora clean, especially in the early rounds. So getting back to the comments here. This guy says, I'm impressed with him, but Chisora got his game plan wrong. He should have fought the way he fought Takam. Let the guy come to him and use head movement. He could have done that for 3 rounds. Then he can go at him in the later rounds. I thought if he chased him the way he did, I thought he might be able to nail him. I got it wrong, and Usyk could take a punch. He is a smart boxer. AJ will beat him for 2 reasons. He is a boxer and can punch harder with precision. Thanks for Derek to have given other boxers another way to fight Usyk. Okay. This guy here says, well, he's very disappointed. In my post-fight review, he says, you never mention how Usyk was noticeably hurt to the body. It's a very long comment here. You have a good boxing eye, but let's just go through this. He says here, I know you want to defend your prediction and the fact that Usyk will do well at heavyweight, but the sad reality is, though I thought it was a decent performance, he was hurt to the body way more than any other Derek Chisora opponent. Let's bear in mind Chisora is in at 242 in both Dillian Whyte fights. So yeah, don't think you're giving Chisora his just due. Usyk has no inside game. With a heavyweight who can fight on the inside and rough him up, Whyte would definitely stop Usyk via body attack, because Usyk seriously doesn't like to be hit in the body. It was quite laughable how a fighter like Usyk, who usually has a high guard, was protecting the body the whole fight. AJ White Fury definitely beat him, but I believe you definitely need to stop Usyk. I'm a hardcore fan, but I was very disappointed in your post-fight. Wasn't a good assessment at all. Well, it clearly was a good assessment. Hindsight shows it was a great assessment. Okay? But these people never turn up in the comment section of your video to tell you that they were wrong. Usually they will disappear, conveniently say nothing. If it's somebody that has a channel, and I've mentioned this in the past, some people have deleted their whole channels after coming at me sideways, telling me I'm crazy for a certain prediction or a certain view. And then when I go check them after the fight, the whole channel's deleted. Incredible. Anyway, moving on. This guy says, it was not impressive at all. I don't care what anyone says. Chisora was having so much success, but just ran out of stamina. Usyk won't last long. AJ will dismantle this dude. Moving on to the next one. He says, Usyk wouldn't stand a chance against Fury, Joshua, and White. Okay, this one says, too small for AJ and Fury. This one says, you're not going to tell me it would be easier to hit AJ and Fury than it was to hit Chisora. His face was literally out in the breeze. Well, actually, I am going to tell you that. That's what I said specifically in this video. I said it's going to be easier for Usyk to hit the likes of AJ and Dylan White than it was to hit Derek Chisora. That's exactly what I said. And, well, I was right, wasn't I? Funny that. Maybe because I know a little bit about heavyweight boxing. More than you were giving me credit for. So yes, I was saying that it's going to be easier for Usyk to hit AJ, and I was right. Styles make fights. Mr. Stroker Vision, big up, long-time subscriber. But here he is saying Joshua will kill this dude. Say no more. This guy says, I expected exactly that fight. I did get worried at the beginning. Think Usyk's computer had to work. Hang on, where does he go here? I still have a lot of doubts when it comes to facing the skill and inside savagery that AJ can unleash, or the elusiveness and bullying of Fury. These guys are just massive, very skilled, and so much longer. Power isn't everything, but to keep AJ and Fury off, you need it. Both these guys are much faster than Chisora. Again, you don't need it. The heavyweight division is replete with little guys, supposedly not big punchers, who go up against behemoths and actually win. Have you seen Jimmy Young when he beat George Foreman and sent him into a 10-year retirement? Jimmy Young wasn't a puncher like that. Outboxed the big bad George Foreman. Okay? These things happen, folks. These things happen. And this is, again, one of the unique things about the heavyweight division is you tend to get far more elite level upsets. When I say elite level, I'm talking about one guy who is supposedly not elite upsetting someone who is elite. You get that happening a lot more in the heavyweight division than you do in other divisions. Now, in the case of Usyk and Joshua, of course, Usyk was always elite, at least in my mind. He was certainly an elite cruiserweight. In my mind, he was also an elite heavyweight. But with many of the big upsets in heavyweight history, it's been guys who weren't necessarily elite. Buster Douglas wasn't seen as elite. Oliver McCall wasn't seen as elite, but they still pulled off huge upsets. This guy here says, it was a comprehensive win as expected, but based on this performance, I don't want to see him against AJ. Chisora was swinging for the fences with no setup as usual, very crude. Okay, this guy said he didn't want to see him against AJ, didn't necessarily say that he didn't have a chance against AJ. This one says, Usyk has a chance against Wilder, but Joshua and Fury would be a step too far for him. This guy says, Hatman, Usyk seems to have left his hand speed and power back in the cruiserweight division. His movements were on point. He had no need for reflexes because Chisora was slow as molasses. If this is the new norm or the new Usyk at heavyweight, we can all rest assured he brings absolutely nothing to be mindful of. Imagine he steps to AJ or Fury like he did tonight with Chisora. Well, clearly doesn't bring nothing, clearly brings a lot. This guy says, I said before the fight that anyone that had watched the Hunter bout knows this man will do nothing versus an elite heavyweight. He was caught how often by a spent journeyman. The rhetoric spoken about how special these Eastern Europeans are is exactly that. Debate should be over following that debacle. Spoken like a true casual. This guy does not understand boxing, but certainly heavyweight boxing specifically. Doesn't understand it. And that is the last of the comments. So the reason, of course, that I'm bringing this up is because people are making the same mistake all over again with Michael Hunter. Now, Michael Hunter is not as good as Usyk, but he is good. He gave Usyk one of the toughest fights that he's had in his career thus far. In fact, I would say Michael Hunter did better against Usyk than Anthony Joshua did. So for people to be writing Hunter off just based on his fight the other day, which he was very, very lucky to get a draw in, I thought he lost the fight. For people to be writing him off solely based on that, they are making the same mistake again. I could give you off the top of my head instances where fighters were written off, heavyweights specifically, because of poor performances, and they went on to score huge upsets. Buster Douglas lost to people like Mike White. He lost to Tony Tucker, of course. He had multiple losses before he stepped in there against Mike Tyson. Still got the win. You got the likes, Evander Holyfield. Before he fought Mike Tyson, he nearly got knocked out by Burt Cooper, a journeyman who took the fight on a couple days' notice. Because Holyfield was originally supposed to fight Mike Tyson that night in Atlanta, but Tyson went to prison, so the fight got cancelled. Then he was supposed to fight Francesco Damiani, and then Damiani pulled out. In stepped Burt Cooper, a journeyman who nearly knocked Holyfield out in the second round on short notice. Then, of course, Holyfield fought Larry Holmes and wasn't impressive against the guy who was in his 40s. A guy who Mike Tyson had knocked out in four rounds several years earlier. Then he gets beaten from pillar to post by Riddick Bowe. It was a great fight, but he was soundly beaten. Comes back, doesn't look good against Alex Stewart in a rematch. Fights Riddick Bowe the second time, pulls off an upset because people were expecting a guy who got nearly knocked out by Burt Cooper, nearly stopped by Riddick Bowe in, the 10th round or the 11th round. Well, he was hurt in both those rounds. That guy is never going to be able to come back and beat this young Riddick Bowe, who's much bigger and stronger and has already beaten him once. And Holyfield hasn't been looking good in the meantime. But Holyfield said, never mind what you think. I'm going to show you. And the funny thing is, whenever I was using Holyfield as an example of why people shouldn't write Usyk off because of his perceived lack of punching power, they would tell me, oh yeah, well, Usyk isn't as tenacious as Holyfield. He doesn't need to be, folks. Usyk brings different things to the table than Holyfield. Similar things, but also different things. Usyk is more elusive and a better boxer than Holyfield. Holyfield's better on the inside and maybe more tenacious and what have you. But in terms of pure boxing, Usyk's better. He's got a better defense than Holyfield, at least on the outside. So, as much as he might not be as good at Holyfield in the pocket, he's better than Holyfield in other areas. And that will show up against these big guys. And so it was against Anthony Joshua. So, with Holyfield, he was written off at multiple stages of his career. Too small, too old, too washed up, struggled against this journeyman, nearly got knocked out by this guy. He's never going to beat Mike Tyson. Tyson's going to walk right through him. See, these are the reasons why I look at a guy like Usyk or a guy like Michael Hunter and say, you know what? They're going to pull off upsets in this division. Not just because of the attributes they have, the speed and the skill, but also because of the attitude of the fans. You see, there was a time back in the 90s when I was of a similar mindset to a lot of these fans that I'm talking about now, where I got caught up in hype of certain heavyweight fighters like Mike Tyson and whatever, and saw these huge upsets that happened out of the blue, which I was struggling to understand. But rather than make the same mistake over and over again, I started to learn from my mistakes. This is why me, Hatman, I was the first person to start saying there's going to be loads of upsets in this heavyweight era. I was saying it because I noticed the same telltale signs, the same red flags occurring in the heavyweight division over the past few years as there was back in the 1990s and late 1980s. I noticed the same things happening. People getting way too carried away with certain fighters' punching power. People getting carried away with the size of heavyweights. This is all stuff I've seen before. And even though I grew up on 80s and 90s heavyweight boxing, I was also a student of the 70s heavyweight era because Muhammad Ali is the person that got me into boxing in the first place. So I'm not coming from a fanboy position. I'm coming from the position of someone who has studied heavyweight boxing for decades. And if you're not an idiot and you're observant, you're going to see certain patterns. And when you recognize those patterns, you realize, okay, I've seen this before. The division is absolutely ripe for upsets now because of the way people are going on about this heavyweight or that heavyweight. It's ripe for upsets. And the reason why small fighters are going to be causing some of these upsets is because of the fact that people are less likely to see them coming. Not just the opponents they go up against, but the fans, because the fans are the ones who actually help shape the perception that fighters have of their rivals. When the fans are saying, oh, this guy's too small for AJ, AJ's going to blast him out in 6, yeah, this is no problem for him at all. That gets into AJ's head. That can get into Wilder's head. That can get into Fury's head. You see it? This is what happens. So, again, the position I'm coming from is a position which is predicated on experience, having observed and studied the heavyweight division for many decades. And I'm telling you right now, Michael Hunter is going to pull off at least one major upset in the heavyweight division. I was right about Usyk, and I'm telling you now I'm going to be right about Michael Hunter. It's not because I'm some, Hunter fanboy. There was some idiot. And I'm calling this guy an idiot because that's what he is. I mean, and even more of an idiot than him are the people who actually liked his comment. This idiot said that Hatman loves Michael Hunter because Hunter reminds him of himself. Hunter doesn't remind me anything of myself. What's this guy talking about? I'm a completely different personality type to Michael Hunter. And when I was boxing, I boxed nothing like Michael Hunter at all. So no, Hunter doesn't remind me anything of myself. This is a fanboy projection that this guy was coming out with. What Hunter, or who Hunter does remind me of, is several heavyweights in the past who have caused major upsets. That's who he reminds me of. Not myself. I've never caused a major upset in the heavyweight division. He reminds me of people I've seen before. And the scenario that Michael Hunter is in right now, and Usyk, reminds me of scenarios I've seen before in the heavyweight division. So, anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Some food for I'm sure there's still going to be idiots in the comment. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. How could Michael Hunter lost to Jerry Forrest and you're saying he can beat one of the top heavyweight? Idiots. Evander Holyfield nearly was knocked out by Burt Cooper, a journeyman. And yet he went on to beat Mike Tyson at Riddick Bowe. Tyson Fury himself got beat by John McDermott in the first fight. Was dropped by Steve Cunningham and yet went on to beat Klitschko. Heavyweight division is not like the welterweight division, folks. It's more like the Wild West at heavyweight. It's far more erratic and it's far more precarious at heavyweight. It's a whole different animal, the heavyweight division, compared to the rest of boxing. You see? So I'm sure there's still going to be idiots who are hard of learning in the comments section. But hopefully there are some sensible people too. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below and let me know who you are. Are you one of the sensible people or one of the idiots? Now, if you're somebody who disagrees with me, that's cool. But it's the people who are condescending and, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. What a load of rubbish. Have you not studied heavyweight boxing? Evidently not. If you've been watching boxing for a long time, then you're clearly not very observant and you're making the same mistakes over and over again. Because anybody with a real good understanding of the heavyweight division over the years will know exactly why I'm expecting Michael Hunter to pull off at least one big upset. They'll know exactly why. And they'll know exactly why I'm not writing him off after his poor performance against Jerry Forrest. Yeah. There's a guy called Ray Mercer from back in the 1990s. A rugged heavyweight, a tough heavyweight. And one of his best performances was against Lennox Lewis. And officially he lost the fight, but it was very, very close and it realistically could have gone either way. Now, Ray Mercer was beaten by Jesse Ferguson. Yeah, he was beaten by Jesse Ferguson. And it wasn't a prime Jesse Ferguson either. Now, Jesse Ferguson was known to be quite a good gym fighter. But in the ring, in professional bouts, he usually didn't turn up. At least not when he was against somebody good. Jesse Ferguson went in there and he beat Ray Mercer to such a degree that there were allegations that Mercer tried to bribe him to lose. That same Ray Mercer went in there against Lennox Lewis and gave Lewis one of the toughest fights of his career. Ray Mercer was also beat by an ancient Larry Holmes. Right? So this is the heavyweight division. It is up and down. It swings and roundabouts. It's very precarious. It's like the Wild West. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme and reason. But if you've studied it for long enough, you expect the unexpected. You know that the heavyweight division is never as stable as people think it is. Where they think, oh, this guy's the best and that's it. Or these two guys or these three guys are the best and nobody can crack this top three. These three guys might be able to beat each other, but nobody outside of the top three can beat these guys. This is what people were saying when Fury, Wilder, and AJ were still unbeaten. They were clearly wrong. There are still some people now holding on to this belief that nobody can beat Fury or Wilder other than each other. That's also a myth. And you'll see that that is a myth in the coming years because there are going to be people outside of Fury and Wilder who beat at least one of those guys, perhaps both. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below.